There's a moment in everyone's life when the excitement fades. You start a new habit, you light a candle, you drink more water, you read one page of a book. You're hoping this will be the thing, the shift, the spark, the breakthrough. But after a week, nothing feels different. The world still looks the same, bills still arrive, work still feels heavy, the scale hasn't moved. The mind whispers, see, this isn't working. We've all been there. That quiet disappointment is universal. But what if that feeling isn't a sign of failure, but a sign you're actually doing something extraordinary? Here's what no one teaches. The field of reality doesn't measure your transformation by speed or spectacle. It measures by signal consistency. It doesn't care how dramatic your action looks from the outside. It cares how true, how coherent, how repeated it is. Think of it like a radio signal. One burst of noise won't reach the other side of the world, but a steady, clear frequency will travel thousands of miles. In the same way, every micro act of alignment, every sip of water with intention, every minute of quiet before your day begins is a signal. You're sending instructions into the quantum field, whether you feel it or not. And those instructions ripple outward. They don't just shape your mood, they shape your day. They shape the chances, the people, the events that start orbiting you. Let me tell you a story. There's a man named Lewis. He was exhausted, burnt out, feeling invisible at work. He wanted to meditate but never found time. So one day on his lunch break, he simply sat in his parked car. 2 minutes, eyes closed, breath in, breath out. He did it again the next day, and again. At first, it felt pointless. But a few weeks later, coworkers noticed he seemed calmer. He began handling conflicts differently. That new energy led to a small project promotion. A year later, that promotion became a full role change, all from a 2-minute lunch break habit that looked like nothing. Another story. A young mother named Aisha felt disconnected from her body after pregnancy. She couldn't find time for the gym, so she started a tiny ritual. Every morning before she got her baby out of the crib, she stretched for 30 seconds, whispering to herself, "This is me returning." Within months, that stretch became a few yoga poses. Within a year, she wasn't just stronger physically. She was leading a small online community of other moms doing the same. Her life didn't shift overnight, it rippled. This is the paradox of transformation. The biggest waves hide inside the smallest drops. Imagine standing at the edge of a still lake. You toss in a pebble, tiny, almost weightless. The surface ripples outward, expanding silently in all directions. You don't control where the waves go, but they move, they touch everything. That's what you're doing every time you take an aligned action, no matter how small. One sip of water, one deep breath before you answer the phone, one honest word written in your journal. The universe doesn't judge the size of your act. It registers the frequency it carries. And here's the most important thing. The field isn't ignoring you. It's mirroring you. But it mirrors you at the level of your consistency, not your intensity. It's not the single healthy meal that rewires your biology. It's the ripple created when that act is repeated, believed in, and held with presence. Over time, those ripples converge. They build a new wave. And that wave carries you into a timeline you couldn't have accessed from effort alone. If you've been waiting for a big breakthrough, pause, take a breath, drop a new pebble today. That glass of water, that stretch, that one paragraph of the book you've been avoiding, that 90-second meditation. That tiny choice is not a small thing, it's a quantum command, a signal saying, this is who I am now. Because here's the truth. The universe always listens to declarations of identity made with frequency.
Most people misunderstand transformation because they confuse effort with signal. They think the universe rewards the hardest worker, the person who strains the most, who grinds and sweats and sacrifices everything. But effort without alignment is like shouting into the wind. You're making noise, but the frequency isn't clear, so nothing coherent comes back. Alignment, on the other hand, doesn't always look like effort. Sometimes it looks like ease. Sometimes it looks like a soft exhale, a gentle shift, a quiet yes. But that ease carries a vibration that the field immediately mirrors. Think about it this way. If you stand in front of a mirror and scowl, the reflection scowls back. You don't need to wait. The mirror doesn't pause and say, "I'll show you your scowl in 6 months." It's instant. The quantum field works the same way, but with one difference. It mirrors not just what you do once, but what you do over and over, what you embody with repetition. That's why small, consistent acts are so powerful. They become your identity. They teach the field, this is who I am. And then the field reshapes itself to reflect that. Let me give you an example. A man named Daniel used to say, "I'm not creative." He repeated it so often that his life mirrored it. He never pursued ideas, he avoided opportunities, he closed doors before they opened. One day, he decided to shift his identity. He didn't write a novel overnight. He didn't start painting masterpieces. He just told himself every morning, "I am creative." And then he spent 5 minutes sketching. Bad sketches, messy lines, nothing worth sharing. But after months of repetition, his brain rewired. Opportunities started appearing. A friend asked him to design a logo. That turned into a freelance gig. 2 years later, he was running his own small design studio. The field mirrored his new identity because he fed it a consistent signal. Here's the trap many fall into. They try something new for a week, don't see fireworks, and quit. They assume the lack of instant results means nothing's happening. But that's like planting a seed, watering it for 3 days and then digging it up to check if it's growing. Growth is invisible before it's undeniable. The energy has to reorganize behind the scenes. Roots spread before shoots rise. The same principle applies to your life. Your consistent signals are forming invisible roots in the field right now. You may not see them, but they're there. And when the shoots break the surface, it'll look sudden to everyone else. They'll say, "You're so lucky," or "It happened overnight." But you'll know the truth. The ripples have been spreading for a long time. Think of your daily aligned actions as drops in an invisible reservoir. Every sip of water, every affirmation, every breath of presence adds to it. At first, the reservoir seems empty, but one day it spills over. That's when reality floods with change. The key is to stop asking, "Is this working?" and start asking, "Am I consistent?" Because if you are, it is working, whether you can see it yet or not. The most magnetic people in the world aren't the loudest, richest, or strongest. They are the most consistent in the frequency they embody. You can feel it when you're around them. Their energy is steady, not scattered. They don't chase, they radiate. And the field can't help but mirror that back with synchronicities, opportunities, relationships, and abundance. If you want to change your life, stop obsessing over big moves and start practicing small, repeatable ones. Whisper to the field instead of screaming at it. You'll be surprised at how much louder the echo becomes.
There's a reason most people never experience lasting change. They confuse excitement for commitment. Excitement is loud. It's the rush of starting something new, the dopamine hit of imagining a better future, the spark of motivation that makes you feel unstoppable for a moment. But commitment is quiet. It's the choice you make when no one is watching, when the novelty is gone, when the results aren't visible yet. Excitement burns bright, but burns fast. Commitment glows steady, like a flame that never goes out. And in the end, only one of them transforms your life. Think about it. How many times have you started something with passion and fire, only to abandon it a week or a month later when the feeling faded? A new workout routine, a diet, journaling, meditation, reading, saving money. At the start, it feels powerful. You picture the outcome, you're energized. But then life interrupts. You're tired, stressed, distracted. You miss a day, then 2, then a week. Suddenly, it feels like you're back at the beginning, and you label yourself inconsistent, weak, or unmotivated. But here's the truth, nothing was wrong with you. The problem wasn't your ability, it was that you built your foundation on excitement instead of commitment. Excitement is temporary, commitment is eternal. And the universe doesn't measure the fire of your start, it measures the steadiness of your return. Imagine a musician learning a new instrument. The first few days are thrilling, the sounds are fresh, the possibilities endless. But after a week, their fingers ache, the notes sound flat, progress feels slow. Most people quit here, assuming they're not talented enough. But the ones who stay, who sit with the discomfort, who return day after day, even when they don't feel inspired, those are the ones who become masters. Life works the same way. The quantum field doesn't reward temporary intensity. It rewards sustained presence. Every time you repeat an aligned act, even when you don't feel like it, you send a louder, clearer frequency into the field. You're saying, "This isn't a phase. This is who I am." And reality has no choice but to rearrange itself to mirror that declaration. Let's ground this with a story. Sophia was an overthinker. Her mind ran in circles all day, analyzing every conversation, every decision. She wanted peace but felt trapped inside her head. She'd read about meditation, but the idea of sitting silently for 20 minutes felt impossible. So she started small.
2 minutes of focused breathing every morning, just 2 minutes. At first, nothing shifted. The noise in her head seemed just as loud. She wondered if she was wasting her time, but she kept showing up. Day after day, 2 minutes. Weeks passed. One morning she noticed she didn't spiral after a stressful phone call. There was space between her thoughts, a pause where before there had been only reaction. That space grew into clarity. That clarity grew into confidence. Over months, her relationships changed. She began making decisions from peace instead of panic. 2 years later, she was teaching mindfulness workshops to others who once felt the same way she had had. Her life didn't change because of a single retreat, a sudden breakthrough, or one grand gesture. It changed because she chose consistency over excitement. Another example, Raj had always struggled with money. He grew up believing he wasn't good with finances, that saving was impossible. Every time he tried to budget, he got overwhelmed and quit. One day, he decided to try something different. He downloaded an app and began saving just $1 a day. That was it, $1. It felt almost laughable, but he stuck to it. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Slowly, the act shifted his identity. He stopped calling himself bad with money. He started saying, "I am someone who saves." That small daily deposit became $5, then $10. Within 2 years, he had built an emergency fund and invested in his first course to learn about financial literacy. Today, he helps others shift their money stories, all from the choice to honor a tiny, consistent act that seemed too small to matter at first. Here's the truth most people avoid. The mind will always chase the dramatic. It wants fireworks. It wants proof. It wants the big win. That's why we love before and after stories, massive transformations, and overnight success. But energy doesn't respond to drama. Energy responds to rhythm, to pulse, to the steady drumbeat of who you are becoming. The universe isn't asking you to explode with passion once and then collapse. It's asking you to show up like a steady flame. And once you embrace that, life gets lighter. You stop pressuring yourself to transform overnight. You stop calling yourself lazy when change is an instant. You realize the smallest actions, when repeated, are not just enough, they're everything. The sip of water, the stretch, the breath before you respond, the thought you choose when no one else can hear it, these are the seeds of transformation. And like any seed, they don't show signs of life immediately. But beneath the soil, miracles are unfolding. Roots are spreading. Energy is building. By the time the shoots rise above the ground, the foundation is already strong. When you look back a year from now, you'll see how far you've come. And it won't be because of one giant leap. It'll be because you chose to stay when it felt boring, when it felt small, when it felt invisible. That's the paradox of transformation. The work feels insignificant while it's happening, but becomes undeniable once it compounds. The question isn't, do I have the discipline? The question is, can I fall in love with the quiet repetition? Because if you can, you'll discover that every choice is a frequency. And frequency, not effort, is the language of reality. This is the art of true transformation. Patience with process, devotion to consistency, and trust in the unseen.
Most people underestimate the power of their mornings. They think it doesn't matter if they hit snooze a few times, scroll their phone before getting out of bed, or rush into the day without a pause. But the truth is, your first actions, the first signals you send when you wake up, create ripples that shape your entire day. The way you enter your morning is like setting the frequency on a radio. If you start in chaos, the whole day plays static. If you start in coherence, the day becomes music. This is why your mornings are sacred, not because of some productivity trend or because successful people say so, but because the very first act you choose is your opening declaration to the quantum field. Let me give you an example. There was a woman named Carla who constantly felt behind. She woke up late, checked her phone, scrolled through emails, jumped into work with anxiety already in her body. No matter what she did later in the day, affirmations, journaling, even a healthy lunch, none of it seemed to stick. She was always chasing alignment instead of embodying it. Then she tried something different. Before checking her phone, before speaking to anyone, she put both feet on the floor, took one slow breath, and whispered to herself, "Today, I choose alignment." That single act took less than 15 seconds, but it shifted her entry into the day. She drank her water with presence. She had patience with her kids before school. She answered her emails with more clarity. One small morning choice created a cascade of energetic consequences. Within weeks, she noticed that people around her were responding differently. opportunities began to flow in. Her life didn't transform because she adopted a complicated morning ritual. It transformed because she claimed her frequency first thing every day. Think of your first act in the morning as the pebble that sets the tone for the ripples of your day. If your first act is scattered, the field mirrors back more chaos. If your first act is coherent, the field mirrors back clarity. It's not spiritual punishment, it's physics. The universe simply amplifies the signal you begin with. Another story. A young man named Andre had struggled for years with procrastination. He always felt like he was behind on his goals, like he was pushing uphill. One morning, instead of falling into the same routine of checking social media and rushing out the door, he decided to try something simple. He sat for 3 minutes with his hand on his heart and breathed. Just 3 minutes, no chanting, no special playlist, no elaborate ritual. And in that stillness, he felt something shift. He carried that calm into the rest of his day. He was more focused at work, kinder to his coworkers, less reactive when things went wrong. That 3-minute act became his anchor. Over time, the ripple effect expanded. He finished projects he had been delaying for months. He built a reputation for reliability. Within a year, he was promoted, not because he worked harder, but because he entered his days with coherence instead of chaos. This is what most people miss. The field doesn't respond to the size of your action. It responds to the precision of it. You don't need to meditate for an hour at sunrise on a mountaintop to change your life. You just need to send a clear, consistent frequency as your first signal of the day. That clarity builds momentum. That momentum becomes a wave, and that wave carries you into alignment with opportunities you never could have planned. Now let's get practical. Imagine 2 different mornings. In the first, you wake up late, grab your phone, scroll through headlines and messages, and immediately feel tension in your chest. You get out of bed rushed, you criticize yourself in the mirror, you grab coffee without water, and you rush into your day. That's your opening signal. That's the ripple you've set in motion. Every action that follows carries the residue of that first vibration. In the second morning, you wake up, put your feet on the ground with presence, and take one conscious breath. You whisper something gentle to yourself like, "I am here," or "I choose alignment." You drink a glass of water with intention. That's it, 2 minutes, maybe less. But the ripple is completely different. That choice expands into your next choice, and the next, and the next. It's not random, it's resonance. And the resonance compounds over time. The truth is, there's no such thing as an isolated habit. Every action touches another. Every vibration threads into the next. Every choice becomes a tuning fork for the field you walk into. That's why mornings carry such disproportionate power. They're not about perfection, they're about direction. They are the first domino that knocks down everything else. Here's what happens when you repeat your opening signal consistently. The field begins to trust you. Your reality starts to stabilize around your chosen frequency. People notice something different about you. They can't always explain it, but they feel it. You become magnetic, not because you're forcing results, but because you're coherent. You've probably experienced the opposite too. On days you start scattered, it feels like the whole day spirals. You spill your coffee, you forget your keys, you argue with your partner, you snap at your coworkers. You might try to fix it later with affirmations or meditation, but it doesn't quite land. That's because the ripple is already spread. The sequence is set. The good news is the same is true in reverse. Start with coherence, and the sequence builds in your favor. And over time, that sequence doesn't just change your day, it changes your destiny. Because here's the deeper truth. The field doesn't follow your to-do list, it follows your vibration. Your mornings are not about productivity, they're about identity. Each morning you are declaring to the field who you are. And the field responds not to your words alone, but to the consistency of your declaration. You don't need perfection. You don't need grand gestures. You need presence. 30 seconds of presence can alter a timeline 5 days from now. A single breath of coherence can shift a conversation you haven't even had yet. That's how powerful your mornings are. So the question is, how will you enter your next one? Will you let chaos write the script, or will you choose coherence? Will you scatter your energy, or will you plant a steady flame? Because the universe is listening from the very first breath, and your opening signal is the ripple that writes the rest of your day.
When most people think about changing their lives, they imagine some breakthrough habit that will solve everything at once. The perfect diet, the ultimate morning routine, the one investment that will make them rich. But in quantum reality, it's rarely about the big thing. It's about the first thing, the anchor, the spark that recalibrates the next dozen micro decisions you make. That's why your first aligned choice each day holds such disproportionate power. It doesn't matter if that choice looks small from the outside. The question is, what sequence does it set in motion? Imagine you wake up and drink a glass of water before coffee. That one act might lead to more hydration throughout the day.
More hydration leads to better energy. Better energy leads to clearer thinking. Clearer thinking leads to a calmer response in a meeting. That calm response builds trust with a colleague who later recommends you for an opportunity. From the outside, it looks like luck. From the inside, it was a ripple you set in motion with a single glass of water. This is why it's not about finding a perfect habit. It's about choosing an anchor habit that carries forward momentum. Let me tell you a story. Michael was a writer who hadn't written in years. Every time he thought about starting again, he felt overwhelmed. A book felt impossible. Even an essay felt like too much. So he did something radical in its simplicity. He promised himself he would write one sentence every day. Just one. Some days, that sentence was all he wrote. Other days, it turned into a paragraph or a page. But the point wasn't quantity. The point was consistency. That one sentence ritual became his anchor. It lowered resistance. It reminded him that identity is shaped by action, not by scale. A year later, he had finished a full draft of his novel. People told him, "I could never write a book." But the truth was, he never set out to write a book. He set out to write a sentence. The ripple did the rest. Another story, Lena was struggling with her health. She wanted to get fit, but felt too out of shape to start. The gym intimidated her. Long workouts felt impossible. So she chose walking, 10 minutes a day, rain or shine. That was her anchor. At first, it seemed pointless. 10 minutes didn't burn many calories. It didn't feel like enough to matter, but she stuck with it. 10 minutes became 15, 15 became 30. She began making different food choices. She drank more water. A year later, she wasn't just fitter, she was coaching her friends through their own health transformations. Her life didn't change because of a dramatic overhaul. It changed because she honored her anchor habit. And here's the deeper layer. Every anchor habit carries an identity. When Lena chose walking, she wasn't just moving her body. She was declaring, "I am someone who honors my health." When Michael wrote his sentence, he wasn't just filling a page. He was declaring, "I am a writer." This is why anchor habits are so powerful. They aren't just actions. They are declarations of identity. And the universe listens closely when you declare who you are through consistent frequency. You might wonder, how do I choose my anchor? The answer is simpler than you think. Start by asking yourself, what's one small act that aligns with the version of me I want to become? Not the version society says you should be. Not the version your parents or coworkers expect. The version you know you are becoming. Maybe it's a 60-second breath before checking your phone. Maybe it's writing down 3 things you're grateful for each night. Maybe it's putting your hand on your heart and saying, "I am enough." These acts seem small, but they are vibrational anchors. And once you choose one, your job isn't to scale it quickly. Your job is to honor it consistently. Because the field doesn't reward sporadic intensity. It amplifies steady coherence. Here's the trap most people fall into. They think their problem is inconsistency. But the real problem is they've never chosen a habit that felt alive. Most people pick habits that feel like obligations. They force themselves into routines that drain them instead of energize them. No wonder they quit. The secret is to choose an anchor habit that feels like a reunion with your higher self. Something so simple, so resonant, that repeating it doesn't feel like discipline. It feels like remembering. Once you find that, everything shifts. Your anchor becomes the doorway. And once opened, it doesn't just change your next 5 minutes. It shifts the field around your entire life. Let's zoom out. Think about a time you made one small decision that spiraled into a massive change. Maybe you decided to call someone back, and that conversation led to a relationship. Maybe you signed up for a class, and that class led to a new career. Maybe you started drinking more water, and that ripple carried into better sleep, better moods, and better health. None of those outcomes looked visible from the starting point, but they were hidden in the ripple. That's how the quantum field works. You don't always get to see the straight line between action and result. You only get to choose the signal you send. The rest is handled in ways you can't predict. That's why anchor habits are non-negotiable. They're not about results, they're about resonance. And resonance eventually collapses into reality. So if you've been waiting for the perfect plan, let this be your invitation to stop waiting. Don't chase the big habit that looks impressive. Choose the small anchor that feels alive. Let it be your signal. Let it be your pebble. And watch as the ripples expand into timelines you couldn't have imagined.
There is a question almost everyone asks when they start a new habit. Is this enough? Is 1 minute of breathing enough? Is 1 sentence of writing enough? Is a 10-minute walk enough? The ego hates small beginnings because it craves proof. It wants to see visible results immediately. But here's the paradox. In the quantum field, 1 minute of pure presence is more powerful than hours of distracted effort. 1 sentence written with clarity carries more frequency than 1,000 written in resistance. 1 step taken with intention is stronger than 100 taken unconsciously. The field does not count minutes, it registers frequency, and frequency is amplified by consistency. Let's break this down with a story. Ethan wanted to get healthier, but every time he tried a new workout plan, he quit. It felt overwhelming. He told himself if he couldn't do an hour at the gym, there was no point. Then he heard something that changed everything. Start so small, it feels laughable. He chose 1 push-up. That's it. Every morning, 1 push-up. Some days, that was all he did. Other days, 1 turned into 10, then 20. But because the habit was too small to fail, he kept going. Within months, he was exercising daily. Within a year, his entire body and mindset had transformed. But the real shift wasn't physical. It was vibrational. He stopped telling himself, I can't stick to anything. He started declaring, I am consistent. That identity shift changed his entire life. Another example. Mia had always dreamed of writing poetry. But whenever she tried, she froze. The blank page mocked her. So she gave herself permission to write just 3 words a day. Not 3 lines, not 3 poems, just 3 words. Most days, those 3 words opened a floodgate, and she wrote more. But even when they didn't, she was still reinforcing her identity as a poet. Over time, her voice grew stronger. Her poems began to touch others. What started as 3 words a day became a published collection. And all of it happened because she stopped asking, is this enough? And started asking, can I be consistent? This is what most people miss. The size of the action is irrelevant. The frequency of the signal is everything. The universe is not grading your habits on intensity. It's attuning to the coherence you bring to them. That's why tiny habits practiced with presence create massive shifts. They bypass the ego's obsession with size and go straight to the field's language of rhythm. Here's a metaphor. Imagine dripping water onto a rock. 1 drop looks insignificant. 10 drops look the same. But after months and years, the rock begins to erode. Not because the water was powerful, but because it was consistent. That's how small, aligned actions carve new realities. They erode the old identity and sculpt a new one. But here's the catch. You can't measure progress by the first few drops. If you look for proof too soon, you'll assume nothing's happening. That's why most people quit. They don't trust the unseen. But the unseen is always where the transformation begins. Think about your own life. How many times have you dismissed small efforts as pointless? You drink water for a week but don't feel different. You journal for a few days but don't have breakthroughs. You walk for 10 minutes but don't lose weight, so you stop. But what if you had continued? What if the shift was already underway, invisible beneath the surface? What if the proof you were waiting for was just 1 month away? 1 ripple away, 1 repeated signal away. The truth is, your field is listening even when your mind is doubting. Every act of alignment is recorded. None are wasted. Even when you don't feel progress, the ripples are spreading. The energy is reorganizing. The future is calibrating. You just can't see it yet. This is why patience is not passive. Patience is an active frequency. It says to the field, I trust. I know my signal is enough. I know the ripple is already in motion. That trust amplifies the signal. That trust collapses potential into form. Without trust, even the biggest actions fizzle out. With trust, even the smallest acts reshape timelines. Let me tell you about Sarah. She was battling anxiety and felt powerless to change it. She read countless books,
tried countless programs, but always gave up when results didn't come fast. Finally, she tried something simple: 3 breaths before every meal. That was her habit. At first, she doubted it. How could 3 breaths matter when her anxiety was so overwhelming? But she kept going, breath by breath, meal by meal. Months later, she realized she was calmer. Her body digested food better. Her nervous system felt safer. Those breaths built a foundation she could expand on. Meditation came easier. Journaling felt natural. Slowly, her entire life began to reorganize. But none of it would have happened if she had dismissed those 3 breaths as not enough. The lesson is simple. Stop asking if it's enough. Start asking if it's aligned. Stop asking how long it will take. Start asking how consistent you can be. Because in the field, the smallest aligned act done consistently becomes a gravitational pull. It draws new opportunities, new people, new timelines. The invisible becomes inevitable. The key is to shift your perspective from results to resonance. Results are the byproduct. Resonance is the practice. If you can hold resonance, the results will always come, maybe not in the way you expect, maybe not on the timeline you demand, but always in alignment with the signal you've sent. So here's the invitation. Choose something so small you can't fail. 1 breath, 1 stretch, 1 glass of water, 1 kind word to yourself in the mirror. Do it every day, not for results, but for resonance. Let it become your anchor. Let it declare who you are becoming. And trust that the ripple is already moving. Because the field is not asking for proof, it's asking for presence. And presence, repeated, becomes power.
There comes a moment in every journey where doubt whispers louder than belief. You've been consistent for a while, you've kept your small habits alive, and yet your outer world doesn't seem to have shifted as much as you'd hoped. The scale still shows the same number. The bank account looks unchanged. The relationships feel stuck. The mind says, "See, this isn't working. You're wasting your time." This is the point where most people give up. But this is also the very threshold where transformation begins to take root. The reason is simple. The quantum field responds not just to what you do, but to how long you can hold the frequency without visible proof. Anyone can meditate once. Anyone can drink water for a week. Anyone can journal when they feel inspired. But the field isn't testing your strength. It's attuning to your stability. It asks, can you hold your signal even when there's no applause? Can you trust the ripple even when you can't see the wave? That's the difference between those who transform and those who repeat cycles. Let me tell you a story. David was trying to quit smoking. For years, he'd tried everything: patches, pills, programs. Each time he'd last a few weeks, maybe a month, but then stress would hit and he'd light up again. Finally, he shifted his approach. Instead of focusing on quitting completely, he decided to focus on identity. Every time he resisted a cigarette, even for 5 minutes, he would tell himself, "I am someone who takes care of my body." Sometimes he relapsed, but he returned to the identity declaration. Weeks passed, then months. Slowly, the cravings weakened. Within a year, he no longer identified as a smoker. The ripple wasn't the absence of cigarettes. The ripple was the consistent declaration of a new identity held long enough for the field to mirror it back. Another story, Priya wanted to save money, but she lived paycheck to paycheck. She told herself there was no point in saving $5 when bills demanded hundreds. But she committed anyway. $5 a week, no excuses. For months, it felt meaningless. But she didn't stop. 1 year later, she had a small cushion. That cushion gave her the confidence to apply for a better job. The better job doubled her income. From the outside, it looked like a sudden breakthrough. But the truth was, the breakthrough was seated in those first $5 deposits, repeated consistently in the face of doubt. Here's the principle. Transformation rarely looks like transformation at first. It looks like discipline. It looks like repetition. It looks like doing something so small that no one else notices. But while the world sees nothing, the field sees everything. Every consistent act is like striking a tuning fork. At first, the vibration feels faint.
but keep striking it, and the vibration grows strong enough to reorganize matter. This is why the hardest part of the journey is the invisible middle. The beginning feels exciting, the end feels rewarding, but the middle feels like nothing, and yet the middle is where the roots grow. Think about a seed planted in soil. For weeks, you see no change. If you were to judge by appearances, you'd assume nothing was happening. But beneath the surface, roots are forming, reaching deeper, creating a foundation that will later sustain the plant. The same thing is happening with you. Your habits, your choices, your declarations are rooting into the field. And once the foundation is strong enough, the breakthrough will rise above the surface. You cannot skip this stage. If you quit in the middle, you never see the bloom. That's why trust is the most underrated part of transformation. Not blind faith, but an embodied trust that says, even though I can't see it yet, I know the ripple is in motion. That trust stabilizes your frequency. And when your frequency is stable, the field has no choice but to mirror it back. Let's get practical. How do you hold trust in the middle when your mind is screaming that nothing is happening? You anchor into micro-proofs. You look for the smallest evidence of change, not the dramatic ones. Did you pause before reacting when normally you'd snap? That's proof. Did you drink water instead of soda one time today? That's proof. Did you choose silence over gossip? That's proof. These small wins are like breadcrumbs leading you back to coherence. Celebrate them, anchor into them, because they remind your system that the field is listening, even if the results haven't arrived yet. Another practice is to return to your why. When the mind asks, why bother? You remind yourself, because this is who I am choosing to be. The act itself is the reward. The ripple itself is the miracle. Results are inevitable, but they're not the reason. The reason is coherence with your chosen identity. Here's the deeper truth. The universe doesn't withhold your breakthroughs as punishment. It simply needs time to reorganize reality around your new frequency. Sometimes the old has to fall away before the new can arrive. That falling away can look like stagnation or even like loss. But it's not loss, it's clearing. And if you can hold your signal during the clearing, the new timeline will emerge stronger and faster than you imagined. Many people call this stage the test, but it's not a test, it's an alignment check. The field is asking, do you really mean this? Is this really who you are becoming? And every time you choose coherence in the absence of proof, you answer with a yes that echoes across timelines. That yes builds momentum. That momentum becomes a wave. And that wave carries you out of the identity you thought you were stuck in. So if you're in the middle right now, if you're showing up daily and doubting whether it matters, let this be your reminder. It matters more than you know. Every sip of water, every breath of presence, every dollar saved, every kind word to yourself, they are not small, they are not wasted, they are roots. And roots always precede the bloom.
Every choice you make is a signal to the field, but not all choices carry the same weight. Some are neutral, some scatter your energy, and some act like accelerators. I call these quantum triggers. A quantum trigger is a micro-action that, when repeated with coherence, unlocks momentum across timelines. It's not about doing more, it's about identifying the one small action that carries the highest frequency for you, the action that recalibrates everything else. The mistake most people make is believing they need dozens of habits to change their lives. They start new diets, new workouts, new morning routines, new affirmations all at once. They overwhelm themselves with complexity. But complexity scatters energy, and scattered energy creates static in the field. What actually creates transformation is precision, finding the one action that feels alive, the one action that shifts your state instantly, and anchoring into it every day until the ripple becomes a wave. Let me give you an example. Jamal was struggling with self-worth. He felt invisible in his relationships and stagnant in his career. He tried big gestures, new clothes, long workouts, expensive courses, but nothing stuck. Then he discovered his trigger, placing his hand on his heart every morning and speaking 3 words, I am enough. That's it. 3 words. At first, it felt silly, but something about it resonated deeply. He repeated it every day. Within weeks, he noticed his posture changing. He spoke with more certainty at work. He set healthier boundaries in relationships. The ripple expanded. Within a year, he had a new position and healthier connections. The trigger wasn't dramatic, it was precise. It spoke directly to the frequency he needed to embody. Another story. Anna was always anxious, always rushing, always chasing the next task. She tried countless time management systems but still felt overwhelmed. Then she found her trigger, pausing to take one slow breath before opening her laptop. That single breath grounded her. It shifted her from reaction to intention. Over time, that pause cascaded into better focus, calmer interactions, and more effective work. Her anxiety decreased, her productivity increased, and she felt more in control of her life, not because she did more, but because she found her quantum trigger. Here's how you find yours. Pay attention to what brings you back to presence most quickly. It won't always be the action you think it should be. For some, it's movement. For others, it's writing. For others, it's silence. Your trigger is the act that reconnects you to the version of yourself you're becoming. It doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to be impressive. It only needs to feel true. Once you identify it, your job is to repeat it with coherence. Not once a week, not when you feel like it, but daily until the field begins to trust that this is who you are. Because in the quantum field, consistency is identity, and identity is what collapses potential into reality. But here's the challenge. Life will test your devotion to your trigger. Some mornings you'll forget. Some days you'll dismiss it. The mind will say, "This is too small to matter." That's where most people give up, not because they're weak, but because they've been trained to expect instant proof. But in the quantum realm, proof arrives after the frequency stabilizes, not before. The ripple is real long before the wave is visible. This is why the sacred art of quantum triggers isn't about discipline, it's about trust. Trusting that your signal is already shifting the field, even when you can't see it. Trusting that the ripple you created today may unlock an opportunity months from now. Trusting that the version of you who already lives in alignment is watching, waiting, and pulling you closer with every repetition. Think about it like this. Imagine you're tuning an instrument. At first, the notes are off. You turn the pegs slightly, again and again, until one day the string vibrates in perfect resonance. Suddenly, the music is clear. Your trigger works the same way. Each repetition brings you closer to coherence. Each repetition sharpens your frequency until the field can't help but respond. Another key to sustaining your trigger is to make it so simple you can't fail. Don't start with something that requires an hour. Start with something that takes less than 2 minutes. That way, even on your hardest days, you can honor it. And by honoring it, you reinforce your identity. Over time, the simplicity becomes strength. The field doesn't care if your action looks small, it only cares that it's consistent and coherent. Let's bring this closer to you. What's one action you can do daily that instantly brings you into alignment? Maybe it's writing one sentence in your journal. Maybe it's stretching for 30 seconds. Maybe it's lighting a candle with intention. Maybe it's drinking a glass of water with gratitude. These are not tasks, they are tuning forks. They are how you declare your frequency to the field. And once declared consistently, reality organizes around them. So here's the truth. You don't need to overhaul your life. You don't need to do everything at once. You need to find your quantum trigger. The one small act that feels like home to your future self. Honor it daily, repeat it with presence, trust the ripple, and watch as the wave carries you into a timeline you couldn't have scripted.
There's a strange thing that happens when your ripples finally start turning into waves. The world notices. People around you begin to sense something different. They might say, "You've changed," or "You seem lighter," or "I don't know what it is about you, but something feels different." What they're picking up on is not just your actions, it's your frequency. Your consistency has built coherence, and coherence is magnetic. It draws people, opportunities, and experiences toward you. But here's the paradox. This is also the stage where many people sabotage themselves. They feel the first signs of change, and instead of leaning deeper into it, they doubt it. They think, "This can't last. What if I lose it? What if it's just luck?" The very frequency that carried them into alignment begins to scatter again.
Why? Because the mind is addicted to the old identity. It clings to what feels familiar, even if that familiarity is struggle, scarcity, or chaos. To step fully into your new frequency, you must let go of the version of you that doesn't trust ease. You must allow success to feel normal. Let me tell you a story. Claire had been working on her self-worth for years. She practiced daily affirmations, journaled, meditated, and slowly began to feel more confident. Eventually, she attracted a healthy relationship. At first, it felt incredible, but then the doubts crept in. She thought, this is too good to be true. I don't deserve this. He's going to leave. She almost pushed him away with her fears. But instead of collapsing back into the old story, she doubled down on her anchor habits. Every day she reminded herself, I am worthy of love. She returned to her breath practice. She trusted the ripple. Over time, the fear dissolved. Years later, that relationship is one of the strongest parts of her life. The wave sustained because she chose to stay coherent even when doubt tried to pull her back. Another story. Anthony had always lived in scarcity. When he finally began saving money and building stability, his first instinct was to spend impulsively, almost as if he couldn't handle having extra. It was unfamiliar. His nervous system wanted to recreate the old chaos. But instead, he created a ritual. Every time he saved, he paused, closed his eyes, and whispered, I am safe with abundance. That small act rewired his relationship with money. He learned to hold wealth instead of rejecting it. Today, he has not only financial freedom, but peace. The key lesson here is this. When the wave arrives, you must learn to ride it. Don't sabotage it. Don't fear it. Don't shrink from it. Trust it. Allow it. Let it carry you forward. Because the universe isn't playing tricks on you. It's not waiting to take away what you've created. It's mirroring your frequency. If you've built coherence, the reflection will remain as long as you sustain the signal. But sustaining the signal requires one thing: embodiment. You can't just do the habits, you have to become them. It's not about drinking water sometimes. It's about being a hydrated person. It's not about journaling occasionally. It's about being someone who processes thoughts with clarity. It's not about saving money here and there. It's about being someone who values stability. The difference between doing and being is what locks in the transformation. Doing creates ripples. Being creates waves. And when you shift into being, the field doesn't just respond, it reorganizes your reality. Think of it like learning to swim. At first, every movement is deliberate. You think about your arms, your legs, your breathing, but eventually the motions become natural. You stop doing swimming and start being a swimmer. The same happens with quantum habits. At first, you practice them. You remind yourself, you try to stay consistent, but eventually they become your identity. They stop being something you do and start being who you are. That's when the field locks into coherence with you. That's when timelines shift permanently. So how do you embody your frequency instead of just practicing it? You stop waiting for proof. You stop needing external validation. You stop asking, is this working? And start declaring, this is who I am. You live as if the reality you desire is already yours, not in delusion, but in identity. And here's the magic. When you do that, the field doesn't have a choice. It must mirror the identity you consistently embody. It's not wishful thinking, it's resonance. Here's a practical way to integrate this. Every time you perform your anchor habit, don't just do it mechanically. Infuse it with identity. If your anchor is journaling, don't just write words. Say to yourself, I am someone who brings clarity to my mind. If your anchor is walking, don't just count steps. Say, I am someone who honors my body. If your anchor is saving money, don't just transfer funds. Say, I am someone who lives in abundance. By tying your actions to identity, you move from doing to being. And once you are being, the field doesn't just respond, it reorganizes your reality. Another challenge at this stage is the people around you. Not everyone will understand your transformation. Some may resist it. Some may try to pull you back into the old version of yourself because that's the version they're comfortable with. This is normal. Don't let it shake you. Remember, you're not living for their coherence. You're living for yours. The field responds to your frequency, not theirs. Hold your signal. Keep embodying your identity. Over time, the people meant for you will adjust to your new vibration, and the ones who can't will naturally fall away. That's not loss. That's alignment. The final lesson of this stage is simple. When the wave arrives, let yourself receive it fully. Don't look over your shoulder waiting for it to vanish. Don't sabotage it with doubt. Don't minimize it out of fear of judgment. This is what you've been calibrating for. This is the harvest of your ripples. Receive it with gratitude, embody it with presence, and keep sending the signal that brought it to you. Because coherence is not a one-time act, it's a way of being. And once you embody it, the waves don't stop. They grow stronger, carrying you into realities your old self could never imagine.
Every journey has a moment when you realize it was never about the big breakthrough. It was never about the dramatic transformation, the one event that changes everything overnight. It was always about the quiet choices, the small ripples, the identity you've been rehearsing day after day. And by now, if you've been following this journey, you've seen the truth. You've seen how every sip of water, every pause before reacting, every breath of presence, every journal entry, every kind word to yourself was never wasted. They were seeds. Seeds that grew into roots, roots that built a foundation, and a foundation that eventually carried you into coherence. The field has been listening to you all along. It never ignored you. It mirrored you. And as your signal stabilized, the reflection became clearer, brighter, more aligned. That's why you're here. That's why you're listening. Because a part of you already knows you are not building your life from scratch. You are remembering it into form, one ripple at a time. But before we close, let's go deeper. Legacy. What is it really? Most people think legacy is about what you leave behind when you're gone. Money, buildings, books, art, a name people remember. But legacy begins long before that. Legacy is what you are broadcasting into the field right now. Legacy is every signal you send into the invisible fabric of reality. Legacy is how your frequency touches the people around you, how your choices ripple into futures you'll never even see. When you choose presence instead of distraction, you shift not only your life, but the energy of the room you walk into. When you speak with kindness instead of criticism, you soften someone else's day, and that softness ripples into how they treat the next person, and the next, and the next. When you embody your coherence, you are planting signals that will outlive you. That is true legacy. And here's the most powerful part. You don't have to wait to create it. You're already creating it, right now in this moment, with the way you're breathing, the way you're listening, the way you're choosing to remember your own power. The only question is, are you creating legacy unconsciously, repeating the static of your old identity? Or are you creating legacy consciously, broadcasting the frequency of the self you've chosen to become? Let me tell you a story. Rosa was a teacher in a small town. She never thought of herself as special. She didn't write books, didn't become famous, didn't make a fortune. But every morning, before greeting her students, she took a deep breath and whispered, "Today I choose patience. Today I choose kindness." She held that signal daily. Her students felt it. They grew up remembering her not just as someone who taught them math or science, but as someone who reminded them they mattered. Years later, her students became parents, leaders, healers, creators. They carried her ripple into their families and communities. Rosa never saw the full impact of her small daily declaration, but the field did. That was her legacy. Another story. Omar worked in an office where negativity was the default. Gossip, complaint, stress. At first, he joined in, but then he decided to shift his frequency. Every day, he made it his habit to offer one genuine word of appreciation to a colleague. Just one. At first, it went unnoticed, but over time, people felt different around him. The energy shifted. Others began to mirror his behavior. Within a year, his team was more connected, more collaborative, more inspired. That ripple didn't just change his workplace. It rippled into every family those colleagues went home to, every interaction they had outside the office. Omar may never know how far those ripples traveled, but the field does. That was his legacy. You don't need to change the world in one loud gesture. You change it by changing your frequency, by sending ripples into the field that multiply beyond your imagination. And those ripples come from your smallest acts, the way you start your morning, the way you speak to yourself, the way you choose presence when no one else is watching. That's where timelines bend. That's where futures shift. That's where your legacy begins. So here's the call. Stop waiting. Stop telling yourself you'll start when you feel ready, when you have more time, when life is less chaotic. The field isn't waiting for someday.
It's listening to your frequency right now. Every choice you make today is writing your future. Every micro-habit is broadcasting your identity. Every ripple is building a wave. And the wave is already moving towards you. The question is, will you meet it? Will you ride it? Will you embody the self who has been calling you all along? Because that self isn't out there in the distance. That self is already here, encoded in your smallest actions, waiting for you to choose consistency over chaos, coherence over static, presence over distraction. You don't need a revolution. You need a rhythm so steady, so aligned, so coherent that the field has no choice but to echo it back. And once it does, you'll see what was always true. You were never stuck. You were never broken. You were always vibrating your reality into form. Now it's time to choose the vibration consciously. So, here's my challenge to you. Choose one habit today, one ripple, one anchor, something so small you can't fail. Do it with presence. Do it with identity. Do it as a declaration of who you are becoming. And then declare it out loud. Write it in the comments below. Share it with yourself, with this field, with the future that is already waiting for you. One small shift, one big ripple. Let that be your signal. Let that be your legacy. The field is listening. The wave is forming. Your future is waiting. And it begins now with the choice you make in this moment.